Oviri Tahitian for savage or wild is an 1894 ceramic sculpture by the French artist Paul Gauguin. In Tahitian mythology, Oviri was the goddess of morning. She is shown with long pale hair, and wild eyes, smothering a wolf with her feet, while clutching a cub in her arms. Art historians have presented multiple interpretations, usually that Gauguin intended it as an epithet to reinforce his self-image as a civilized savage. Tahitian goddesses of her era had passed from folk memory by 1894. Yet Gauguin romanticizes the island's past as he reaches towards more ancient sources, including an Assyrian relief of a master of animals type, and Majapahit mummies. Other possible influences include preserved skulls from the Marquesas Islands, figures found at Borobudur, and a 9th-century Mahayana Buddhist temple in central Java. Gauguin made 3 casts, each in partially glazed stoneware, and while several copies exist in plaster or bronze, the original cast is in the Musée d'Orsay. His sales of the casts were not successful, and at a low financial and personal ebb he asked for one to be placed on his grave. There are only 3 other surviving comments of his on the figure. He described the figure as a strange and cruel enigma on an 1895 presentation mount of 2 impressions of a woodcut of Oviri for Stéphane Mallarmé. He referred to it as La Tueuse the Murderess in a 1897 letter to Ambroise Voix, and he appended an inscription referencing Honoré de Balzac's novel Sérafita in a circa 1899 drawing. Oviri was exhibited at the 1906 Salon d'Automne 57, where it influenced Pablo Picasso, who based one of the figures in Les Demoiselles d'Avignon on it. Background: Gauguin was foremost a painter. He came to ceramics around 1886, when he was taught by the French sculptor and ceramist Ernest Chaplet. They had been introduced by Félix Braquemin, who, inspired by the new French art pottery, was experimenting with the form. During that winter of 1886-87, Gauguin visited Chaplet's workshop at Vaugirard, where they collaborated on stoneware pots with applied figures or ornamental fragments and multiple handles. Gauguin first visited Tahiti in 1891 and, attracted by the beauty of Tahitian women, undertook a set of sculptural mask-like portraits on paper. They evoke both melancholy and death, and conjure the state of fataruma, brooding or melancholy, imagery and moods later used in the Oviri ceramic. Gauguin's first wood carvings in Tahiti were with a guava wood that quickly crumbled and have not survived. He completed Oviri in the winter of 1894, during his return from Tahiti, and submitted it to the Société Nationale des Beaux-Arts 1895 salon opening in April the following year. There are 2 versions of what ensued. Charles Morris Fr. claimed in 1920 that Gauguin was literally expelled from the exhibition. In 1937 Ambroise Voix wrote that the piece was admitted only when Chaplet threatened to withdraw his own works in protest. According to Bengt Danielsson, Gauguin was keen to increase his public exposure and availed of this opportunity by writing an outraged letter to Le Soir, bemoaning the state of modern ceramics. At the outset of 1897, Voix addressed a letter to Gauguin about the possibility of casting his sculptures in bronze. Gauguin's response centered on Oviri. "I believe that my large statue in ceramic, the Tueuse the Murderess, is an exceptional piece such as no ceramist has made until now, and that, in addition, it would look very well cast in bronze without retouching and without patina. In this way the buyer would not only have the ceramic piece itself, but also a bronze edition with which to make money." Art historian Christopher Gray mentions 3 plaster casts, the fissured surfaces of which suggest that they were taken from a prior undocumented wood carving no longer extant. One was given to Daniel Monfred and now belongs to the Musée départemental Maurice Denis the Priory in Saint-Germain-en-Laye. Another version in plaster, with the surface finish of wood, was kept by Gustave Fitt, and subsequently formed part of the collection of his son, Léon. The 3rd version was kept by the artist who made the casts. A number of bronzes were produced, including the version placed on Gauguin's grave at Achuona, cast by the Fondation Singer Polignac Fr. and erected March 29, 1973. Description and sources: Oviri has long blonde or gray hair reaching to her knees. Her head and eyes are disproportionately large, while the aperture at the back of her head resembles a vaginal orifice. She holds a wolf cub to her hip, a symbol of her indifference and wild power. It is not clear whether Oviri is smothering or hugging the cub, but her pose invokes ideas of sacrifice, infanticide and the archetype of the vengeful mother, influenced by Eugène Delacroix's 1838 painting, Medea about to kill her children. A second animal, likely another wolf, is at her feet either curling in submission or dead. Art historians including Sue Taylor suggest the second animal may represent Gauguin. The association between the woman and a wolf stems from a remark Edgar Degas made defending Gauguin's work at the poorly received 1893 Durand Ruhl exhibition, when Degas quoted La Fontaine's fable The Dog and the Wolf, which is usually taken as implying that freedom should not be exchanged for comfort or financial gain. You see, Gauguin is the wolf. In Oviri, the mature wolf, the European Gauguin, perishes while the whelp, the Gauguin of Tahiti, survives. The Tahitian myths had largely disappeared by Gauguin's time. He based his own accounts on other sources without acknowledgement, as had most artifacts associated with that culture. His representation of Oviri is largely a work of imagination, informed by a collection of what he described as his little world of friends in which he took with him to Tahiti on his first visit. These included Odilon Redon's lithograph La Morte, photographs of subjects such as a temple frieze at Borobudur, Java, and an Egyptian fresco from an 18th dynasty tomb at Thebes. Other sources that have been suggested include an Assyrian relief of Gilgamesh clutching a lion cub now in the Louvre, and a Majapahit terracotta figure from the Jakarta Museum. Oviri's head seems based on mummified skulls of chieftains in the Marquesas Islands, whose eye sockets were traditionally encrusted with mother-of-pearl and worshipped as divine. Elements of her body may draw from Borobudur images of fecundity. Thus life and death were evoked in the same image. In a letter to Mallarmé trying to raise a public subscription to purchase the work, Morris titled the sculpture Dianchesris Diana the Huntress, an allusion to the ancient Greek goddess Diana of the hunt, moon and childbirth. He made the same reference in his poems on Oviri. Barbara Landy interprets the life and death theme as indicating Gauguin's need to abandon his civilized ego in a return to the natural state of the primitive savage. The work is related to the 1889 ceramic Black Venus, which shows a woman kneeling over a severed head resembling the artist. Nancy Mole Matthews believes the creatures in her arms and at her feet are actually foxes, animals Gauguin had used in his 1889 wood carving Be in Love, You Will Be Happy, and in his 1891 Pont-Aven oil painting The Loss of Virginity. In an 1889 letter to Émile Bernard, he described the Sois Amoureuses fox as an Indian symbol of perversity. There is a long tradition in Asian folklore of foxes having the power to transform into women, for example in Japanese yokai or kitsune folklore. Gauguin depicts the Oviri figure in at least one drawing, 2 watercolor transfer monotypes and 2 woodcuts. It is possible that the woodcuts were created in Pont-Aven in the summer of 1894, before the ceramic. The last to appear is probably the drawing in what is apparently the first issue of Gauguin's Papier broadsheet Le Sourire the Smile, a serious newspaper published between August 1899 and April 1900. It was accompanied by the inscription Et la monstre, entraînant ce creature, fecundus semence des flancs généreux pour engendrer Seraphidus Seraphita, and the monster, embracing its creation, filled her generous womb with seed and fathered Seraphidus Seraphita. Seraphidus Seraphita is an allusion to Honoré de Balzac's novel Seraphita, which features an androgynous hero. In this first issue of Le Sourire, he reviewed a local Maui author's play by that dealt with incest among other themes, and invoked Seraphidus Seraphita. The review congratulated the play's savage author and ended with a plea for women's liberation through the abolition of marriage. The accompanying drawing is distinctly androgynous. Interpretation. Art historians have put forward various theories as to the seeming multiplicity of meanings inherent in Gauguin's representation. Most obviously, the figure invokes Tahitian legend and themes of death and superstition. It reflects the artist's view of female sexuality. A common motif in 19th-century art was the connection between long, wild hair and evil femininity. Related is the delight Gauguin took from its alternative title Savage and the implications of a brutal, bloodthirsty deity, which seems to refer as much to himself as the goddess. Tahiti deity. Gauguin's figure invokes the Polynesian goddess Hina, depicted by Morris as a Diana-like deity clutching a wolf cub, monstrous and majestic, drunk with pride, rage and sorrow. He titled an 1894 self-portrait in plaster as Oviri. The original is lost, but a number of bronze casts survive. He used double mirrors to capture his familiar Inca profile, the result reprising his jug in the form of a head, self-portrait. This was one of the earliest occasions Gauguin applied the term Oviri to himself. Gauguin sometimes also referred to himself as Oviri, the savage, writes Merida Bodelsenda. The Stuttgart version of his 1892 oil painting Ihire Oi Ihia Where Are You Going? Depicts a woman clutching a wolf cub. Pollitt remarks that this stocky, sculptural and androgynous figure gives a first glimpse of Oviri. Oviri was the title of a favorite Tahitian song, a melancholy tune of love and longing that mentions the subject's savage, restless heart. It recounts the love between 2 women for each other, both of whom have grown silent and cold. Gauguin translated the verse in his series of romanticized journal Noa Noa Tahitian for Fragrance, a written project he undertook to examine his Tahitian experience, which he accompanied with a series of 10 woodcuts, the only one of his songs reprinted in the Tahitian newspaper Logwaves when he became editor. B. Danielson believes the song echoes Gauguin's dual attachment to his Danish wife Meta and his then Vahini Tahitian for woman Tamana, His young native wife and the focal point of Noa Noa. Colonial experience. Noa Noa contains an account of a journey into the mountains with a young man whom he eventually understands as sexless, leading him to meditate on the androgynous side of the savage in his manuscript. Ben Pollitt notes that in Tahitian culture the craftsman/artist, neither warrior/hunter nor homemaker/carer, was conceived androgynously, an ambiguous gender position that appealed to Gauguin's subversive nature. Taylor believes Morris may have been describing Gauguin in his 1897 poem Shining Hyena of the Woods as part of two long extracts from their collaboration on Noa Noa. Gray views the sculpture as representing the expression of Gauguin's profound disillusionment and discouragement. Noa Noa is part of Gauguin's documentation of his experiences as a colonial visitor to Tahiti in 1891 to 1893. He first used the term Noa Noa to describe the scent of Tahitian women, a mingled perfume, half animal, half vegetable emanated from them, the perfume of their blood and of the gardenia tatensis, which they wore in their hair. On his return to Paris in 1893, Gauguin was apprehensive about exhibiting his Tahitian works. Noa Noa was to provide the context necessary for the public to comprehend the new motifs presented at his Durand Rural exhibition. It was not completed in time for the opening of the exhibition. Self-portrait. Gauguin asked that Oviri be placed on his grave, which seems to indicate that he saw the figure as his alter ego. According to Matthews, he saw the fox as changeable in its gender as he was, and thus symbolic of dangerous sexuality. A number of sources indicate that Gauguin was suffering a syphilitic rash that prevented him from traveling to Tahiti for several months. She suggests the orifice is a pars pro toto for the woman who infected him. The anthropologist Paul van der Grijp-Pendel believes Oviri was intended as an epithet to reinforce Gauguin's persona as a civilized savage. In his final letter to Morris, the artist wrote that "You were wrong that day when you said I was wrong to say I was a savage. It's true enough, I am a savage. And civilized people sense the fact. In my work there is nothing that can surprise or disconcert, except the fact that I am a savage in spite of myself. That's also why my work is inimitable." Reception and influence. Whether or not the sculpture was to be exhibited at the Salon de la Nationale, it was scheduled for the café proprietor Lévy at 57 Rue Saint-Lazare, with whom Gauguin had concluded an agreement to represent him before his last departure for Tahiti. It failed to sell, and Charles Morris was unable to raise public money to acquire it for the nation. Gauguin had thought his only likely interested patron would be Gustave Fayet, who did eventually buy it for 1,500 francs, but in 1905, after Gauguin's death, Gauguin was celebrated by the Parisian avant-garde after the posthumous retrospective exhibitions at the Salon d'Automne in 1903 and 1906. The power evoked by his work led directly to Les Demoiselles d'Avignon in 1907. According to David Sweetman, Picasso became an aficionado of Gauguin in 1902 when he befriended the expatriate Spanish sculptor and ceramist Paco Durios in Paris. Durios was a friend of Gauguin and held several of his works in an attempt to help his poverty-stricken friend in Tahiti by promoting his oeuvre in Paris. Art historian John Richardson writes, "The 1906 exhibition of Gauguin's work left Picasso more than ever in this artist's thrall. Gauguin demonstrated the most disparate types of art, not to speak of elements from metaphysics, ethnology, symbolism, the Bible, classical myths, and much else besides could be combined into a synthesis that was of its time yet timeless. An artist could also confound conventional notions of beauty, he demonstrated, by harnessing his demons to the dark gods, not necessarily Tahitian ones, and tapping a new source of divine energy." Both Sweetman and Richardson point to the Gauguin Oviri as a major influence. First exhibited in the 1906 Salon d'Automne retrospective, it was probably a direct influence on Les Demoiselles. David Sweetman writes, "Gauguin's statue Oviri, which was prominently displayed in 1906, was to stimulate Picasso's interest in both sculpture and ceramics, while the woodcuts would reinforce his interest in printmaking, though it was the element of the primitive in all of them which most conditioned the direction that Picasso's art would take. This interest would culminate in the seminal Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. In 2006, a bronze version of Oviri sold at Christie's New York for US $251,200. Recent exhibitions: Tokyo, Saiba Department Store, Kyoto, Musée National d'Art Moderne, and Fukuoka, Centre Culturel, Gauguin, August 1969, No. 110, Munich, Haus der Kunst, Weltkulturen und Moderne Kunst, 20 Olympics, July to August 1972, No. 1726. The Color of Sculpture 1840 to 1910, Henry Moore Institute, Leeds, 1996. Gauguin Tahiti, Paris, 2003. Gauguin Tahiti, Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, 2004. Chefs-d'œuvre du Musée d'Orsay pour le 150e anniversaire de la Galerie Tretiakov Gallery, Moscow, 2006. Cézanne Picasso, Ambroise patron of the avant-garde, Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, 2006. Cézanne Picasso, Ambroise patron of the avant-garde, Art Institute of Chicago, 2007. Gauguin, maker of myth. Tate Modern, London, 2010. Gauguin, maker of myth, National Gallery of Art, Washington, D.C., 2011. Gauguin Polynesia, N.Y. Carlsberg Glyptotek, Copenhagen, 2011. Gauguin Polynesia, Seattle Art Museum, Seattle, 2012. Gauguin, Metamorphosis, MoMA, NYC, 2014. Paul Gauguin, Fondation Baylor, Rye Hen, 2015.